This is The Week on Word, a podcast featuring a roundup of the most interesting, informative, and entertaining interviews from WURD Radio. You can listen to Word Radio anytime, anywhere on WURDradio.com and the Word Radio app. Give us a play and download us today. In this episode, Aimee Inama is the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation's press officer for driver and vehicle services. Inama joined Tonya Pendleton on Reality Check to remind listeners of the upcoming travel deadline to file for Real ID. And Gabriel Escobar is the editor and senior vice president of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Escobar spoke with Solomon Jones on Wake Up With WURD to talk about the dissolution of the Communities and Engagement Desk, which resulted in the layoffs of several Black and Latino journalists. But first, Walter M. Kimbrough is the president of Talladega College and author of a recent op-ed article on the hazing death of Omega Psi Phi pledge Caleb Wilson. He joins Evening WURDs with Dr. James Peterson to contextualize hazing traditions at historically Black colleges and universities.
Excited to welcome to the program Dr. Walter M. Kimbrough, the president of Talladega College, widely respected for his dynamic leadership and innovative approach to education, author of Black Greek 101, and also the author of a recent MSNBC op-ed article entitled Caleb Wilson's Hazing Death is a Familiar Cautionary Tale. President Kimbrough, welcome to Evening WURDs.
Hey, what's up, man? How you doing today?
I'm doing well, good brother. Thank you so much. I know you're busy, but thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join me on the program. Here today. President Kimbrough, just full disclosure, I'm a member of the organization that is, implicated in this awful tragedy around Caleb Wilson's death. But I was fascinated by your op-ed for a couple of reasons. One, you're a subject matter expert in this space, which means that you have been following closely these different cases of young people who are tragically dying in hazing incidents at HBCUs and or with historically Black organizations at predominantly white institutions. Can you talk a little bit about the problem and the challenge as you see it with pledging and hazing for the Black community in the 21st century?
Well, so I mean, the challenge really goes back to in the 80s, and I mean, I was in school in the 80s at University of Georgia. Things just started really getting crazy. And I always tell people that was when America entered a hyper-litigious period. You could just tell by all of the judge shows on TV, Judge Judy, Judge Joe Brown. So everybody was suing for everything. So if you hurt somebody's child, you're going to get sued. So we were in that period of time. I was actually on the Alpha Phi Alpha National Board in 1989. Well, yeah, 1988 to 89. When I got off the board, Joel Harris died pledging Alpha at Morehouse. And that changed everything because it was sort of like, man, the Alpha's killing people now. We got to change this. And the very next year, in 1990, all the Black organizations got together and said, no more pledging. But the problem is you can't change a 400-year-old culture by legislation. And it has always been doomed to fail because we keep going through these iterations of, well, we're doing a new membership process and we'll do a new membership process. And you can have a process that's written, but people still don't buy into it. When Michael Davis died pledging Kappa Alpha Psi at Southeast Missouri, I think it was 1994, I spoke on the campus a couple years later, and they had like nothing had happened. It was just like, this is what we do. I mean, it was chilling to hear people just talk about it so cavalierly that was the deal. So we've been dealing with this, but in the last 15 years or so, the new pattern I've seen is that you've got particularly men, but women too. I call them extended adolescents. These are folks who are like 24 to 30 years old. They may have a job. They may not have a job. They want to still move the freshman girls in on orientation day, and they like 28 years old with no job. They always hanging around. And so the current undergrad refer to them as the old head. So, if I go speak on campus now, I always say like, so what's old head? Like fall 21, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I'm spring 86.
Right. So I'm spring 1990. So when they say these old heads are fall 20, that doesn't make sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So, but those are the people that have the most power in all of our organizations. They don't care about district directors, vice presidents, national presidents. They don't care about none of those people. Mm-hmm. Those are the people that everybody feels beholden to. And unfortunately, every time I've seen people get arrested in the last 15 years, the first thing I was interviewed by a paper in Louisiana. And before all of the people have been arrested, I said, I got a theory, but I'm going to just wait. And then the ages came out, 23, 25, 28. I'm like, there you go, all three of them. So that's the thing that we haven't figured out. And everybody's still trying to come up with a new process. But until we figure out how to rein in this group of people that are not active, they're not financial, they don't go to grad chapter meetings, but they run the undergraduate chapter.
That's right.
So that's the challenge.
Yeah, so I pledged in spring '90, so I literally pledged right on the cusp of what you're talking about, right? And so like that was the presidents of all the Pan-Hellenic organizations, the leaders of all the Black Greek letter organizations had gotten together and said, hey, we can't do this anymore. And I think part of what you're saying, but correct me if I'm wrong, part of what you're saying is that same body has never sat down to figure out what kind of process can you do in this litigious world that can still speak to the traditions that formed the foundation of some of these organizations. I mean, there is this problem you're talking about of these so-called old heads just hanging around too long and having much more power over these intake processes than they should, over these pledge processes, they have much more power than they should. But I want to go back to your earlier comment, which is, why hasn't that group come back together to say, hey, we understand all the legal stuff, but we haven't done the due diligence to figure out, like, well, what can we do to restore some of the whatever you think was lost? I mean, now we're generations away from that now, so I don't even know if that could work. But that never happened, President Kimbrough. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, like, what would that look like? I mean, what is possible?
Well, so I mean, they initially because I remember meeting with that group a couple of times in the mid to late 90s. They tried to start thinking about how to do, something different. But the challenge is, from my perspective, is that we have these national brands, but we don't operate like a true franchise. It's like everybody is an entrepreneur by their chapter. So it's like somebody saying, my family's in New Orleans and I have a McDonald's franchise, but I don't, serve just regular Big Mac. I put like jambalaya on mine. Mm-hmm. And you in Philly and you make, the Philly cheesesteak Big Mac. It's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's what we do at our organizations. Everybody still wants to do their own personal tradition. And the organizations will lay out a plan to say, this is what we all say we're going to do. And then people say, okay, yeah, that's cool. We'll do that. And we're going to do what we've been doing. And that's been the part we haven't been able to get people to give up some of their local traditions because they want it to be special to us. It's like, our chapter's been doing this for 50 years. And so why are we going to change? So we'll follow your process, but we're going to still do what we do too. And when they go off script, that's the thing. So we haven't been able to deal with the people going off script. And I don't know if there is a way to do that. I'm like the new general president for Alpha Phi Alpha has a hazing task force that I'm on, and we're talking about a new process. And I told him in our first meeting, I was like, yeah, but we got to deal with people's free will. You know what I'm saying? We could change, put anything in writing. That's fine. We can't guarantee that people are going to follow what is written. And that has been the problem the entire time because there's been more of a press to do these things, to prove yourself for membership. And it's not just even within that organization. As I studied it, on some campuses, it's the non-Greek people. If say your chapter does a process and there's no hazing involved, the non-Greeks on campus be like, they paper. You know what I'm saying? So you get pressure from everybody. It's like, it could be from your organization. It could be from other organizations. In the Northeast, when I started studying, it was the Latino groups. They would have something called viewings, where the Black Greek organizations would pledge their lines in front of the Latino groups, which to me just blew my mind. That y'all let somebody in our session like that. But to show them what we're doing is legitimate. And they would have to get, sort of approval from the Latino groups. It's crazy.
It is.
So
it is crazy.
I have no idea. I have no idea how we control that.
So President Kimbrough, and I feel like we're in the weeds, but I don't care. This is an important issue for the Black community as far as I'm concerned. One of the challenges I see is that this entire system of membership intake, pledging, and hazing of Black Greek letter organizations at HBCUs and PWIs, it at the core of it is something about authenticity, right? Yeah. And in that sense, President Kimbrough, it is kind of a microcosm for Black life, which is we're always engaged in like these authenticity games, whether that's in the streets or whether that's Black folks in corporations or wherever it is. There's always like, you're not Black enough, you're not this. I mean, you can see these things played out at various levels in various institutions. And so what's going on in these college campuses is a microcosmic iteration of what's going on with Black identity, period. So I feel like maybe there's a broader conversation that we can have. But like you, I mean, things have changed so much that I feel like people have like lost even what it's supposed to be about, right? Because these things get violent. None of these kids should be dying, is what I'm saying. None of these kids should be dying. Like, so I'm trying to figure out, where do we draw the line between some kind of healthy way of establishing authenticity, understanding that that's a part of the broader piece of Black culture, but also understanding like, how do you talk to the family? How do you talk to Caleb Wilson's family? He did not have to die. He shouldn't have died.
Yeah. No, I don't know how. It's like interesting when I wrote that piece on MSNBC because, you know, my family's in New Orleans. His aunt reached out to me on LinkedIn saying, hey, thank you. Like I said, in New Orleans, it's like 1 degree of separation. Everybody knows somebody really close like that. So we do have that. We still have that as a problem. Part of the challenge, I think, is that over time, and I know a lot of times students don't like it when I say this, I think the caliber of people who have entered these groups has changed dramatically. So if you at least had a chapter of people who like saying, I want to do X, Y, and Z after this, there's a level that comes in where somebody will say, all right, that's enough. I mean, I was a dean of pledges. So I was always times, if I knew we had a party and you knew other brothers were coming to town, and back then when you had a line, everybody come to see your line. That wasn't good. So I told him like, y'all need to disappear. I don't even need to know where you are. And I will find you tomorrow. Because I had to let these brothers get out of town. That was just me. Like, that's the prudent thing to do. But now you have people who are joining these groups that I meet that this is the highlight of their life. This is the first thing they have really ever accomplished. You know, some of them came to school just to pledge. They don't care about anything else. And I think that's the challenge. So when you got people who are like, I'm trying to go law school, I'm trying to go be a medical doctor, I'm trying to go get a PhD, they're not usually as involved in some of the foolishness. And I've been on campuses where you see these sharp kids and you're like, man, I can't believe they're not agreeing. And they'll tell you like, these people here crazy. I'm not doing it. And what's happening, particularly with women, if you notice, there are places like, for example, in New Orleans, the Delta grad chapter had a line of it was over 50 people. Bro, there were like 3 or 4 judges.
That's right.
I'm talking about judges. I mean, these accomplished women who joined Delta in their 40s and 50s. So it's like the organization still have this power, but you're seeing now more and more of the serious people saying, I'm just gonna wait and go grad chapter. And the grad chapter stigma doesn't exist anymore. When I just looked at the number of people on that line, it's like, my HR director at Dillard was on the line. I mean, these were accomplished women. So I think that's what's happened. So now you just got the people who happen to get to college, this biggest thing they've ever done, they join these groups. And so now you give somebody who really hasn't accomplished anything all of this power, and it's a bad recipe.
I agree with that. And I know I sound elite in saying this, but I do think the caliber of the member of the person matters. And what their goals are and what they come to school for, all those things matter. And when things start to fall apart and when you see these things falling apart in these different incidences, I think the same way that your research and your expertise has shown that it's these like 23 to 28 to 30-year-olds who are having undue influence, I think if you check and see like what are those folks focused on, what are their careers, what are they majoring in, I think you'll find the same sort of data will bear itself out.
But like I said, people say, well, these elitist groups, and I push back. I'm like, no, they're not. I'm like, we got some folks. I have been places on programs with Greeks, they could barely read a bio. I'm like, this is crazy. So there needs to be a level of, because this isn't like some regular student organization. This isn't the gaming club. This isn't it's not just like some club. These are high-risk organizations that have to have liability insurance. So you have to have a different kind of person in this kind of group. It's not just something for, giggles and craps. It's not that kind of thing. So when you got people in there where this is it for them, this is the pinnacle of their academic experience, that's not good for us. So there needs to be a level of elitism, which it used to be like that. You go back 20s and 30s, they were hazing back then too, but you didn't have the same issues because it was always people who were trying to do something else.
Yeah, that's also what's fascinating to me too, is that, my dad pledged in 1950. He was like online for like a year, but like kids were not getting killed in the 1950s. So we lost these organizations, we lost it somehow. We lost but
think about somebody Black in the 1950s going to college. You had to be of a certain caliber because Black folks really didn't have a whole lot of money to be in college to begin with.
That's right.
So you really only had a certain class of people who were really able to go. That really really opened up higher ed. I mean, you started in the 40s with the community college movement, and then in the 60s in California, they were opening up a community college every week. So that's when we really started opening up our education. But you think about Black people who went to college in the 50s, so my mom, late 50s, went to Cal Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was hard for Black people. There was a handful of them. And like her major, she was a double major in math and chemistry.
Wow.
It's a different kind of Black person that was in school back then. And she's a Delta.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was very different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder, President Kimbrough, do you think the future of all these organizations is just intake in the graduate chapter sphere? Or like, will ultimately these undergraduate chapters go away? I mean, there aren't too many. You can't have too many more Caleb Wilsons before the whole system breaks.
No, you can't. So I mean, people worry about that. I mean, and I've talked to particularly Omegas that I know who are older than me. They're just like, no more undergrads. I mean, they like anime. And I'm just like, I'm like, it's a good leadership experience. So I believe in the undergraduate experience, but I can see more and more people saying, we just got to get it out of their hands. But I mean, even if you take the case at Southern, the president of the grad chapter who worked at Southern is also involved in it. He probably like 40. He's relatively young, but you're the president of the grad chapter. So you're supposed to be over all of this to make sure this is happening, and you involved in it too. And that's just the problem. So I don't know. I would hate for it to be like that. I think we've got to really push the standards of being able to get in. And I think it's got to be limited to some people that really are your sharpest people that are really trying to do something with their life. And this is just not the biggest thing that's ever happened to them. Because if not, you just, like I said, I'm telling you, man, I have been a number of places where I've been on programs that are Greek programs, and you listen to the members struggle reading a bio, and you're like, what the hell is going on?
We got to raise the standard. We got to raise the standards.
Raise the standards.
Yeah.
It is embarrassing to me. I'm telling you, I see it all the time. Mm-hmm. All the time. I'm now more impressed when they can come across and they articulate well. And I'm like, oh, wow, that was good. And it shouldn't be like that. I'm supposed to expect that. Now that is not the norm. That's the exception. And that's what's sad.
President Kimbrough, we only have about a minute and a half left, but I should have started here. But for folks unfamiliar with the tragedy around Caleb Wilson, can you give them a synopsis of what happened there at Southern University?
Yeah, it was, I mean, they were conducting, I don't know if they were pre-pledging or post-pledging, but they were conducting some illegal pledge activities. They were at a warehouse that was rented out by one of the members, the chapter's father. So they bring in these other people, and he ends up getting, punched in the chest and has a seizure or something, passes out. They had on some kind of pledge gear, which back in the day would have been normal, but they changed his clothes. They drop him off at a hospital. And then, basically say, we were playing basketball and our friend, fell out or whatever. It was easy to take the lie because if we boys and we playing basketball, I'm not going to just drop you off and then go about my business,
right.
So that's, right. So that was already suspicious that they changed the clothes. And so then he died. I mean, some of it, you could say it was a freak accident or if he had some pre-existing condition. And they were hitting out with their fists, but with, boxing gloves. So there was a level, they did have a layer of thinking of protection to say it's a boxing glove. But when you touch people, you just never know what could happen. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he passed out and he died. And, they tried to spin the story. And then you started realizing who was involved. And like I said, there are at least 2 staff members that are involved as well. So it's a deeper issue. And the young man was a member of the band. The band is very high profile. Mm-hmm. Human Jukebox, they had just performed at the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. So it's been, and then I told people this was going to be bad because the boy's dad is a member of the fraternity.
Yep.
And he had worked detail for Gail Benson, who owns the New Orleans Saints. And so when at first I'm seeing this like post on X by Gail Bisson, I'm like, why the hell is Gail Bisson commenting? Because she knows the boy and she spoke at his funeral. So that just took it to a whole nother level because you got the owner of the Saints commenting on hazing.
Yeah, a lot of exposure stories been in the news quite a bit. I wonder, President Kimbrough, like, why didn't they call 911? Like, why?
Yeah,
does that make a difference or not? Well, that made a difference here or not?
Yeah. Well, it could have made a difference. They should have. And in the new law that was written in 2018, based on a young man who died at LSU, part of that law says if you don't notify the emergency people, you can be charged for that. So they might catch an extra charge for not dialing 911. So that was, but they knew they were busted. They were like, they're thinking, oh man, we can't say anything because we out here hazing. So let's just go drop him off at the hospital and keep going. Well, you're going to get caught, but they made it worse by dialing 911 because that is specifically in the law that you're supposed to provide aid if something happens, and they didn't.
Yeah, and I mean, again, the time you moving them around and the time it takes you to get to
all that time, right?
All that time. I mean, 911 could have been there in minutes.
Could have been there, yep.
You know, so but again, there's nothing you can say to Caleb Wilson's family. There's nothing you can say to Caleb Wilson's family. Nothing.
No, it's not. It's it's not like I said. They all like I said, not reaching out to me on LinkedIn. It's something else. But we'll wait and see what all the charges. They figuring out how they're gonna do this thing, but they going to jail. It's a high profile case. This is the first test of this new law. They're going to jail.
There will be several Black men who will face criminal.
Jail. Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're going to jail.
Wow.
They're going to jail.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. President Walter Kimbrough, the president of Talladega College, author of Black Greek 101, and an extraordinary MSNBC op-ed.
You're listening to The Week on Word. Represent your favorite station in style. Look for Afrocentric tees, hoodies, tumblers, notebooks, mugs, and more. Just click the Shop tab at wordradio.com. Show the world that you're all about Black Talk Media.
You gotta look good.
This is The Week on Word, a podcast highlighting the top conversations on Word Radio. Just look for WURD Radio on all social media. Up next, reality check host Tonya Pendleton chats with PennDOT's Aimee Inama.
Now we have joining us Aimee Inama. She is the press officer for PennDOT's Driver and Vehicle Services, and she is here to talk to us about Real ID. Good morning, Aimee. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I am doing just great. Now, we don't have too much time until the deadline for Real ID. Tell us what people need to do in order to get this very important identification.
Well, as you mentioned, the federal enforcement date is May 7th, which is fast approaching. So if someone wants to get a Real ID, and I don't know if your listeners are aware, but in Pennsylvania, Real ID is optional. So that means Pennsylvanians have the choice of getting a Real ID. And if they do, then they need to come down to our driver's license centers and they can apply for a Real ID, photo ID, or driver's license. If they choose not to get a Real ID, they can use an alternative form of federally acceptable ID, such as a valid passport.
Now, why is it so important to have a Real ID? What is a Real ID going to allow you to do that you cannot do now?
Right. Well, a Real ID is a federally acceptable photo ID or driver's license. That's a convenient way for people to fly domestically, enter certain federal buildings that require a federally acceptable ID, or military bases. So if you're going to do something like that, you might decide a Real ID is right for me. And that's when you would come down to one of our driver's license centers and apply for a Real ID.
So if you have a regular driver's license or a regular state ID, both of which you can use for an identification for many places, but if you have one of those IDs and you plan to travel in the United States, domestic travel is what we're talking about here, will you be able to get on the plane?
On May 7th and after May 7th, no, you would need, if you just have a regular driver's license, you will need an alternative form of federally acceptable ID to fly domestically.
And what would those forms of ID be that would be federally accepted for you to fly, let's say, down to Atlanta, spring break,
Right.
or it's a college reunion or something like that?
You would need a valid passport, and TSA's website lists of all of the alternative forms of ID people can choose from if they do not want to get a real ID.
Okay, so I've got that regular driver's license or regular state ID. Do I come down to PennDOT with that ID and then they change it? And if so, is there a fee for that?
Right. Well, a real ID is a one-time fee of $30 plus any renewal fees. So, you would just pay that. In order to get a real ID, you need to bring several documents with you. So you need to have proof of identity, and that's in the form of a birth certificate, and it could be the original birth certificate or a certified copy, or you could present a valid unexpired passport as your proof of identity. You also need to show proof of Social Security number. So that could be your Social Security card or a W-2. And the key is you need to show all 9 digits of your Social Security number. You also need to show 2 proofs of current Pennsylvania residency, and that could be your driver's license or a vehicle registration utility bill. And then you also have to show any proof of legal name change if applicable. And we have a complete list of all the documents needed on our website.
Okay, so this is not a short list of items that you have to have in order to switch your regular license over to a real ID. You will need a Social Security card. You will need an additional proof of address aside from that license. And you will need what else?
You also need to show proof of identity. So that's in the form of a birth certificate or a valid unexpired passport.
Okay, so this is if you already have a driver's license. So even if you went through that process and you already are holding a valid Pennsylvania unexpired driver's license, you still have to bring those additional items in order to get real ID.
That's correct.
Wow, that is a lot. But your point is that this is optional. So it is really for people who, as you said, if you are regularly entering federal buildings, and that could be, well, would the post office be considered? Well, you don't have to show ID to get into the post office, so we'll forget that. But any other federal building that you may go into, as well as any domestic travel. And I would think that that would include anywhere in the United States that you may be interested in traveling to. As I said, if it's your college reunion, if it's your family reunion, any place that you are getting on a plane and going from one state to another, you will need to have this enhanced ID.
Yes, that's correct. And that's just to fly domestically. And then for any federal buildings, it's not all federal buildings. It's only federal buildings that require a federally acceptable ID. And for a complete list of those, I would urge your listeners to visit the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay, so you'd have to go to that website. Now, for any information about Real ID, you can go to PennDOT. What is your website?
Our website is dmv.pa.gov.
Okay, so dmv.pa.gov. Now, you were having and have had some Real ID days. Are there any more of those between now and May 7th?
Yes, we're having several Real ID Days events in April. They're the first Monday. They're on Mondays in April. The only day we're not going to have it is April 21st. And but on the other Mondays in April, we will have our Real ID Days events, and we're going to open up the centers all day long, and we are just going to process Real IDs during on those days. And if someone can't make it to one of our Real ID Days events, they are welcome to come down to the driver's license centers during normal business hours, and we will process their applications for a Real ID. Additionally, we are going to have another Real ID Day event on May 5th. And I would just urge your listeners to go to our website and check out the latest on our Real ID Days events for the most up-to-date information.
So for these Real ID Days, it will just be processing of Real IDs. This is going to be on Mondays. Is this at any DMV location?
We're going to be opening up 57 of them. So I would just, again, visit our website to have a complete list of all those.
That's pretty comprehensive, 57. That's going to be across the state, I'm sure. And so you can go into any of those 57 that you can find on the website. And that's when you will know where to go for these Real ID Days. Now, what will be the hours for the Real ID Days?
They are, I believe it's going to be 8:30 to 4:15 on those days.
So you do have all day, and you're going to just let the other folks that need things, they will come back another day. But for folks who want to become compliant with Real ID, that is what these days are for. And if you come down with all that information and documentation, you can have an existing license or state ID transferred over to a Real ID. Or if you don't have a license or a state ID, this might be the time to get one if you want to travel domestically and you don't have a passport and don't want all that hassle. You just want to go ahead and get that Real ID.
That's correct. If you determine, and we do have a quiz on our website, and I would encourage your listeners to take that. And if it determines and you determine, you know what, I really want my Real ID, then definitely come down and get your Real ID. I also want to stress, like I had mentioned, if you don't get that down there by May 7th and you're not traveling, say, until December, you still have time and everything. So you don't have to get it right on May 7th. So like, say I'm traveling in December and I don't want to come down right now to get my Real ID. I have time. So I want to stress that as well.
Right. And it's not like a passport. You can go in and get that done on the same day.
For a Real ID, if you come in and you go to one of our 15 same-day Real ID centers, you can walk out with a Real ID at the time of service. If you go to another driver's license center that's not a same-day Real ID center, you will get your product mailed to you within 15 business days.
Oh, so that's really good to know, because you might have a trip thinking that you can go in there and just get it in the first day. There are only 15 centers that process them on the same day. So you want to go to the website if you have a trip coming up and make sure that you can get that done in time for your planned departure. Well, Aimee Inama, let's get that website one more time so folks know where to go.
Sure. It's dmv.pa.gov.
Wonderful. Aimee Inama, the press officer for PennDOT's Driver and Vehicle Services. If you plan to travel domestically, it's really a good idea to go ahead and get that Real ID, particularly if you've got a trip planned. Thank you so much for joining us today on Reality Check.
This is the Week on Word.
Why is word important to the community?
Black media disseminates all of the things in our culture.
Now it give our people a voice, you feel me?
I wouldn't see myself.
It gives people that looks like me a chance to relate to what's going on in the world.
We need to see who we actually are.
Because it's coming from us is like more important, like we tap in more to it, if you know what I mean.
I wanted to see what other little black girls and now what people my age would want to see.
What other way can we all kind of get on the same page and hear that all if we don't have media to share it with?
We are WURD, Progressive Black Talk Media. You're listening to the Week on Word podcast. To learn more about our programming, visit WURDradio.com. Our last conversation for this episode features Wake Up With WURD host Solomon Jones with Gabriel Escobar, the editor and senior vice president of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
We are joined now by Gabriel Escobar. He is the editor and vice president at the Philadelphia Inquirer. He joins us this morning on Wake Up With WURD. Gabriel, good morning.
Good morning, Solomon. Good to be with you.
Yep, it's good to have you. So the Inquirer, of course, is the paper of record in Philadelphia. I have a long and storied history with the Philadelphia Daily News and Inquirer. I'm currently a columnist, contributing columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm not on staff, but I have been writing for the Inquirer for a number of years, and I am compensated for that work. So just as a disclosure to the audience, wanted them to know that. But there have been some changes at the Inquirer lately, and they are changes that have been received by the community in a way that people are alarmed, especially in Black communities. The Communities and Engagement Desk has been shut down. I want to ask you first why that Communities and Engagement Desk was put in place in the first place and when it was put in place.
Sure, yes. And for your listeners, yes, thank you very much, Solomon, for your contributions to the Inquirer, which are regular and well received. And for your listeners, I will remind them that come June 1st, which is, a month and a few days away, the Inquirer will turn 196 years old. So, yes, we have been around for a while. With the Communities and Engagement Desk, this really was an experiment in community-focused reporting that emerged directly from the George Floyd murder and the conversations that produced. So one of the criticisms of the Inquirer, and a valid one, is that we don't consistently and comprehensively cover communities in Philadelphia specifically. The Communities and Engagement Desk it's an interesting reporting model. We are not the first to implement it. We were not the first. This is actually almost a kind of philosophical turn in how journalism should operate, and it puts as a primary goal understanding communities at a deeper level than journalism, and certainly daily journalism has historically done. And that is by, really embedding yourself almost in the community, having conversations with the community, and it really is communities, plural, so that you're not there only when news, in the way journalists define it, happens, right? So many of your listeners, would know that, when news happens, the press shows up. This philosophy is more having conversations and an understanding of communities at a deeper level, and not necessarily, and this is the interesting twist, with the aim of producing a specific story. The theory is you spend time with people, people get to know you, there's a level of trust, there's a level of understanding, and then, that leads eventually to stories that are deeper, more nuanced, more telling. So that's the foundation. And, it was, for us, it was a really worthwhile experiment, particularly in the moment when the Inquirer in particular, but other, media organizations were criticized. Again, this is a historic criticism, actually. And so we put the desk in place, and, we staffed it. It was run by, essentially an editor with a deputy, and then, reporters who set out on the mission, including one editor whose role really was just going out there and listening. So that's the foundation of the desk.
Okay, so that was put in place as a reaction to what happened with George Floyd. There were massive protests here in Philadelphia, around the country, and around the world. Many companies, including the Inquirer, made a commitment to anti-racism. And as a matter of fact, in February of 2022, Elizabeth Hughes wrote this. 2 years ago, we made a pledge to become an anti-racist organization. An important part of that work requires an unflinching examination of ourselves and our approach to journalism, past and present. This work had a marked beginning but has no fixed end. It is in many ways a daily duty for all of us. And then the piece goes on to apologize to the Black residents and communities of Philadelphia, to the Black journalists of the Inquirer, past and present, and to other communities and people whom we have also neglected or harmed. And so this, in many ways, the dismantling of that communities desk, which employed many Black and brown people, is seen in my community as betrayal. As a betrayal of that promise that was made in 2020, and then the apology that was made in 2022. Is it that, or is it something else?
Well, it's not that. It is something else. And what you said about what we put out publicly, including the apology, the Communities and Engagement Desk was one part of what we did in a kind of newsroom holistic examination of what we do. And, some of the things that we put in place back then, all of them survived, with the exception of the Communities and Engagement Desk. So we examined our policies, for example, our reporting approaches. We are much more conscious and deliberate about the people that we talk to, when we produce our journalism, we actually track the voices that appear in our journalism. And reporters are actually asked to track this so that we can ensure and actually document that we are being intentionally inclusive in the voices that we present in our journalism. We have a very elaborate workflow guide for our journalism that is specifically designed so that reporters consciously know what they should be doing when they are out in the field performing journalism. So all these policies, which were really produced by a very large group of Inquirer journalists who took on this mission, this self-examination mission, and deliberately and conscientiously set out, put practices in place. So all of that, is in place now. The Communities and Engagement Desk was a very interesting experiment, and the aim of the desk was not only to produce the journalism that I described a few minutes ago, it was also meant to instruct through example the rest of the newsroom on how, a more inclusive approach to reporting would benefit the journalism. So there are lessons learned that were put in place and introduced by the Communities and Engagement Desk that obviously are now part of the newsroom approach. Significantly, one of the pillars of the Communities and Engagement Desk was what is called, we call internally the soapbox salon, which was created by the editor of the Communities and Engagement Desk. It's a large panel of community leaders. It's north of 30, and they meet with regularity. And it's a way for, at the time, the Communities and Engagement Desk to listen to voices from the community, not with the intent of give us information so we can write a story. It's essentially let's have an open conversation, consistent over time, so that we know and understand your issues. The soapbox salon still exists. It has moved over with the editor. It's actually the founding editor of the Communities and Engagement Desk. It has moved over to the opinion section, which is obviously where your column appears, Solomon. And that survives. So there are structures that were part of the Communities and Engagement Desk initiative that survive and, in my view, continue to thrive.
What percentage of the Inquirer's editorial staff is Black?
I should have had this at the top of my mind. I know it's 23% people of color, and I'd have to double check, but I think it's 8 or 9% Black.
So that's a gross underrepresentation of how many Black people are in Philadelphia. And so I guess my question is, and this will be my final question, how does the Inquirer intend to address the issues of the Black community going forward when the Black community is so underrepresented in the editorial staff there?
Broadly speaking, we fail at our job if over time and consistently we don't write about the issues of importance in our city and in our region, right? Just for your listeners, the newsroom has 200 people. It would be ideal and actually impossible for us to cover all issues involving all communities all the time. What my instruction to the newsroom is, we are professional journalists, and when we go out, we should report stories as completely and as professionally as possible. That is an overarching mission articulated in somewhat simplistic terms. If if people in Philadelphia, and obviously in the region, because we cover the whole southeastern Pennsylvania and, southern New Jersey, do not see the issues that concern them, do not see themselves actually over time, I have to emphasize, over time, in the course of a year, then we are not succeeding in our job. As to the number of Black journalists in the newsroom, yes, it is, it's an ongoing issue that we face, recruiting and retaining, professional Black journalists. We have, this is not an issue that's a challenge that's new to the Inquirer. It's not an issue or challenge that's new to the news industry. We have, begun what we call a pipeline program, where we are deliberately creating a structure. The historically Black colleges are a focus of this, where we intentionally seek, hopefully mentor, recruit as interns, and hopefully hire, Black journalists. And, as a newsroom leader and as newsroom managers, we actually, have, diversity as a goal and a requirement. How we succeed, depends on a whole bunch of factors, but it remains a commitment. And if you're asking me if the current state is a measure of success or failure, I would say it's not a measure of success at all. We need to do better.
Gabriel Escobar, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us this morning on WURD Radio. We certainly appreciate it.
You're listening to The Week on Word. Stay connected on the go with the new and improved WURD Radio app. Search WURD Radio in your app store. Stream every show with increased clarity. Easily access WURD TV, EcoWord, and Livelihood. Remember, Black media matters. Get the new and improved WURD Radio app today. Available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Thanks for checking out this episode of The Week on Word. Let's stay connected. Sign up for our newsletter and listen to us online at WURDradio.com and always on the WURD Radio app.